Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming back to another episode of our podcast, A While Back. Today, we're going to be talking to Grandpa one-on-one, and we're going to try to get a little bit more information from the original episode, because unfortunately, we ran a little bit short on time, and there were quite a few questions that we weren't able to get more specifics on. So today, we're going to try and get back into the questions and get a little bit more specifics on each answer. I think it's one that's going to be pretty interesting and well because it primarily goes back to, once again, his youth and growing up on the farm. But today, Grandpa is going to title this episode. So, Grandpa, what is today's episode going to be titled?
Dolly Parton has nothing on me.
Dolly Parton.
And we're going to that later.
Dolly Parton has nothing on me. So that is today's title. All right. So let's get started. Now, we talked about it briefly on the first episode, what life was like in the 40s. But tell us a little bit more about it. So do you remember, like from an electricity standpoint, so do you remember the first time y'all had electricity, and did they already have electricity when you were younger? I remember on the first episode you said that y'all got the tractor about the same time that y'all got electricity into the house, correct? Okay. All right, so at that point in time, did y'all have an electric stove that y'all bought? Electric heater? What kind of stuff did y'all have at that time from an electrical point of view that you remember?
Okay, well, what I remember is when I was, this was when I was about 5 years old. That was in 1949 when we first got our electricity, and then we got the new tractor. But before that, we would have a wood stove. It was a wood cook stove and a wood burning stove. And the wood burning stove was the one that would heat up the whole house. And each day you'd bring in the wood and you feed the deal. And I remember Daddy or Mama, whoever would get up first, usually I think it was Daddy that got up, and he'd start the fire in this wood heater. It was a regular wood heater, belly wood heater, with the stovepipe going out through the roof. And he'd start the fire on the wood stove. And then a lot of times Mom would even cook coffee on that wood burning stove because it would get real hot. Right. And it would heat up the whole house. It would heat up the whole downstairs. Now, it was us boys, most of us boys just slept on the upstairs. Mm-hmm. And so, but in those days, the heat came, you didn't have as much heat at night. At night, you didn't let the wood burning stove burn at night. You would have, you'd sleep under a feather bed.
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of people know what a feather bed was.
No, but we had one growing up. I remember.
Did you have a feather bed?
I remember. Okay. And it would get really hot underneath.
Exactly. Yes. And a feather bed, what they were made of these fine feathers from either a duck or a goose.
Right.
And they were just the breast feathers. Mm-hmm. Now, if you'd used the wing feathers or something, I'm sure they would have poked you at night or whatever. But these were just real fine feathers that Mama and whoever would sew it into a big blanket. And that's what you put all the feathers in there, stuff the feathers in on one end. After you sewed the 3 or 4 corners, you stuff the feathers in, and then that's what you call the feather bed.
Right.
And that's what we mostly slept under. And boy, you talk about warm. That feather bed was warm. And, that was the way we stayed warm in the wintertime.
So even though you had the one central unit, the one wood burning stove, that would still supply enough warmth throughout the house, even at night, for everybody in the rooms, including the feather beds?
No, at night you didn't have you just sleep under the covers. You'd sleep under the deal. And then, of course, in the summertime, you had windows on every side of the house, mm-hmm. and you'd have screens. You'd have good screens, to keep the mosquitoes and whatever bugs out. And you'd open the windows, and that was your air conditioning at night.
Mother Nature.
You had a cold Mother Nature.
Right, exactly.
That good cold wind. And I tell you, when you first got the air conditioner, that was something else. I mean,
So
when-
on the electricity side as well. So when did you first get a refrigerator? Because I know we had talked once before, and you had told me about how you would get blocks of ice and coolers.
Yes.
So when did y'all first get a refrigerator?
Well, the first refrigerator we got after we got the electricity, and then we got the refrigerator. But let me go back a little bit and talk about how we used to keep meat,
Mhm.
and during the times we had these. They had what you call these meat clubs, and it was about. I know my cousin. He was a neighbor. He was not even a quarter mile away from us. But I think we had 2 uncles and some other neighbors and stuff. I think it was about 8 of them. And what they did, like Daddy would get up. I remember him getting up early around 6 o'clock, 6:30, and they'd go to a certain house. And each Saturday, this was every Saturday, what they did, they went and they butchered a calf.
Mhm.
And what they did, they divided it among the 8 people that was in the meat club. And so, say if you had a 300-pound calf or 10 people, you get 30 pounds of meat or whatever. And they bring it home in a brand new wash tub always. Daddy had a brand new wash tub. I remember he'd bring it in and he had a meat cloth over it.
Oh.
And he'd bring it in. And then what they would do, we had an ice house right there next to the post office in Shiner. It was a little old ice house. But he'd go, I guess, and get a block of ice.
Mhm.
And we had this little, it looked like a little it was a freezer, but it really wasn't a deep freeze or anything. It was something that would this was before electricity
Right.
now. And he'd put, you put the ice on one end of the deal and the meat on the other. And it would probably keep the meat cold for about 3 or 4 days. But by that time, as big of a family as we had, usually the meat would be gone
Yeah,
from Saturday
right.
from Saturday to Thursday. But I couldn't wait to get that fresh meat every Saturday morning. Mama would fry that fresh meat, and wow, that was delicious.
So let me ask you this, since you brought up a meat club.
Okay, meat club.
Did the meat club consist of just neighbors that were closest to
It
the
was
farm,
mostly-
or was it family?
No, it was mostly it was family and mostly neighbors
Okay.
that were in the meat club.
Right, okay, all
And
right.
so it wasn't a very far to travel, but that's the way you work your meat in those days before the electric came in. And like I say, then when the electric came in, everything changed. You had a freezer to keep your meat.
Yeah, so y'all did y'all's own processing at home. At
Yes,
that point,
yes,
right.
everything was
All
done
right,
at
right,
home
right,
then.
right.
But also going back, I mentioned how my mama used to make those homemade kolaches on
Oh yeah,
Sunday and
absolutely.
stuff. I forgot to mention her pies.
Yeah.
She made pies that were out of this world.
Right.
And you know, these nowadays you make lemon pie, you make it out of Jello, and bam bam. I can even
Absolutely.
make a lemon pie nowadays. That's not a lemon pie.
No.
The way Grandma made it, she had us. I mean, Mom made it. She had us squeeze maybe 7 or 8 lemons each, and then she went ahead. I don't know how she did it, but she cooked it in a pan or whatever in a pot. But when that lemon came out, that was the most delicious lemon pie or chocolate pie you could ever dream of. It wasn't. You didn't have to put 2 inches of meringue on that thing
Right,
to eat
right,
it.
right,
It
right.
tastes good. You didn't need any meringue at all. You just ate that thing. It was delicious.
And literally, when you're talking about grandma's cooking, grandma absolutely positively did not buy anything that was store bought. I mean, grandma made her own batter from eggs, fresh milk. Everything literally was supplies from the farm. And it was something that she went out and picked, or somebody had to milk a cow and bring in the milk.
Right.
So that's why those pies The kolaches, everything was so phenomenal because it literally came straight from outside.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was a lot of work. We know that.
Oh, yeah.
But it was outstanding.
But another thing, we had like an acre garden, and we had a peach tree on the end of it, and then we had grapes running on the side. And the grapes were, they were the sweet red grapes.
Yeah.
And they were excellent. And Mama made a lot of jelly out of those too.
Well, she did a lot of canning
Oh, yeah,
too.
a lot of canning.
Yeah, I remember
Pickles, jelly,
Mm-hmm.
sauerkraut, peaches, you name it. She canned everything.
She did.
But I don't know. That woman, she was a
And
cook and a half.
absolutely. One thing I remember about Grandma is that you always had fresh bread.
Oh,
It didn't
yeah.
matter what time you got there. It didn't matter if you were coming for dinner, for supper, whatever. You always had fresh bread with Grandma because that was a staple by far.
Exactly.
All right, so
And I remember too, we had uncle and aunt. They used to come in from Moulton, and they were poor, real poor. And what Mama always did, she always would make them, send them maybe 2 or 3 loaves of bread home with them. She was always sending bread. And I mean, when we grew up, we didn't have money, but I guarantee you one thing we did have. Like that song goes, "The Many Colors." We didn't have much money, but we were rich as we could be because we never went hungry. We never went hungry, and we never needed any clothes. Now, that brings me back to Dolly Parton.
No, I got it already.
Okay. Dolly Parton had this song of many colors. And that's why I said from the beginning of the show, Dolly Parton had nothing on me. Because when Mama first started baking, she used this gladiola flour. And she loved gladiola flour. But then Robin Hood flour came out. And they had all these beautiful colored sacks. They had all kinds of flowers and you name it on them. And so Mama started buying that Robin Hood. And the next thing I know, Mama would take that sack, take all of it apart, and she'd come up to me and she'd measure me. And she said, Norbert, I'm going to make you a shirt. And she'd make these beautiful shirts. And goes to show you what kind of seamstress she was. She didn't need no pattern like they do nowadays.
Right.
She came up to me and she measured me right here, measured me under the arms. And the next thing, man, she sewed it, put the deal. And I guarantee you one thing. I was so proud of that shirt that I always said, Dolly, when I heard that song, A Coat of Many Colors, I always said, Dolly, you've got nothing on me. My mama made me a shirt that was prettier than your coat.
So Grandma would actually take the sacks of flour and make shirts out of it.
And not only for me, it wasn't just for me. I got to say, she made them for Paul and for the, I think Raymond too. Yeah, the ones below me. So it wasn't just that Mama sewed that shirt of many colors for me. It was also sewed.
Right, so she made it for Uncle Paul. She made it for Uncle
she made
Raymond,
the other ones too.
And for Uncle Henry.
But that's why I wanted to bring up that episode of
okay, well, I get the episode.
Dolly Parton.
All right, I get that part of it.
She's got nothing on me.
All right, I get that part of it.
Okay.
So we know that, and I know the boys don't remember that much, but I absolutely remember. Grandma not only cooked for all of y'all growing up in the house, but by the time grandkids started coming along, like us, like all the older grandkids, when we started coming along, Grandma would cook with no problem for 20, 30, 40 people on up. And it was one of those things where you never had to wonder if, oh my gosh, is there going to be enough food? Grandma cooked for everybody. And Grandma never outgrew that habit because she is such a hard worker. Even when there was just 2 or 3 people, maybe 4 people visiting, she was still cooking for 12 to 20 people.
Oh, yeah.
And I was always impressed by that by Grandma. She just absolutely positively did not know any other way other than doing it the hard way for the biggest possible family she could do. And that was always outstanding with Grandma.
Yeah.
All right, so Now, let me ask you this. Do you remember when y'all first got electricity, did y'all listen to the radio? How would that work?
Oh, let me tell you something else. When we were first, when during the olden days, this was before we got electricity, or even when we had it, I think it was. Every Sunday, you know, we play dominoes or cards, whatever, whatever. But I know every Sunday we'd be looking down the road for one of the aunts or uncles to come to the house. And most of the times they did. We had Joe and Mary's. We had, I think, two of those, Joe and Mary's and stuff. And we had Francis and Uncle Joe and all of them that would come on Sundays.
Now, those were grandma's brothers and sisters, or
well,
grandpa?
both.
Both. Okay.
Mamas
okay,
and
okay.
daddies. But anyway, they would come over and we'd be playing dominoes. But at 3:30 came, when 3:30 came, KCTI out of Gonzales, they brought on Joe Patek and his orchestra.
And his orchestra, right.
You call about everybody toe tapping. Joe Patek and his orchestra would come on with that shiny beer barrel polka. They would come in with that and they'd end with that. And I mean, that was 1 hour from 3:30 to 4:30 that we listened to the Joe Patek band every Sunday.
Wow, that's funny.
That was our entertainment for Sunday.
I bet it was.
For Joe Patek band to come on. But we also, like I say, we played dominoes and stuff, and it was always a lot of fun. We visited with people. But at that time, you were always looking for company because, you know, for some reason, I don't know, you didn't visit as much. You didn't have the transportation like you do.
Well, plus Sunday
right.
was a day to relax and just do whatever you felt like doing.
Right, it was a day of relaxation.
Instead of having to worry about getting out in the field. So I can understand that part. So now, this was another thing that came up.
Okay.
What were the kind of arguments that you and the other 7 siblings would have on the farm, whether that was with just 1 or 2 in particular? Was it about, well, I'm doing chores and you're not doing anything, or I don't want to do this, you can do this? What were the kind of arguments, what kind of little tips would you guys have? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure we have plenty of
Now, I know that you
brothers.
and Aunt Pauline would have arguments.
No,
because
well,
Grandpa told me about
all
some
of us.
those.
It was all of us.
All right, well, let's hear some of them.
Arguments. I mean, you know, everybody thought they were doing more than the other one was, which wasn't true.
That's true, right?
Everybody was pitching in as much as they could. And, yeah. But that's only brothers and sisters. You're going to have your ups and downs. But, you know, when you get older, you realize, you know, hey,
they were just
silly
nothing
stuff.
at the time.
Silly
right?
stuff,
Exactly.
right.
Okay,
right.
good. All right.
So it really didn't amount to that much.
So in the very first episode, you talked about Uncle Adolph and how you were always so envious of the fact that he was always on that tractor.
Right.
So at what point in time did you finally get on the tractor and drive the tractor?
Let's see. I was 11 years younger than Adolph, and he went to the service. I think it was at 20 or 21.
So around 9 or so?
9 or 10.
There you go. Okay, good. All right, outstanding.
And so.
And what was that like for you when you finally got to get up there and drive the tractor?
Oh, that was wonderful. I loved it.
Did you feel like you were the boss?
I loved it. I did. I felt like I owned the world, man. I'd see my sisters out there, little brothers, chopping, and I'd wave at them. Oh man! So I guess they envied me as much as I envied
I was going to
Adolph.
say, so you finally saw it from
Oh
Uncle
yeah,
Adolph's
I
point of
saw
view,
it
right?
from his point of view,
All
but
right,
he deserved it.
Yeah, he had earned it. Absolutely, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
he
he earned it because I no telling how many plows and colorways he.
Well, in the mules, he had to get behind
mules,
just to do it the
exactly.
old-fashioned way to begin with.
But
right.
going back to them mules, let me tell you something. I always told Daddy, I said, you know, I watch these old people, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I love old people, and I've always visited with old people. But I watch these old people, how they would farm with these mules. And I always told Daddy, I said, Daddy, you know what? I said, I wish I had a pair of mules I could farm with. And he'd look at me and he'd say, boy, you don't know what you're asking for. He said, I farmed with those mules all this time. But to me, it just fascinated me to watch them mules go and that old farmer plow with that one row. And he'd get to the end of that row and he'd pull on them reins. He'd say, whoa, and the mules would stop and he'd tell them, and he'd turn them and go down the next row. It was just, I was fascinated by mules. Of course, when I was on the tractor, I was happy too.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm sure Grandpa was trying to allude to the fact that you have no idea you're fighting against the mule a lot of time too, right? So I'm sure that was hard work.
When I was talking to my older sister, she said, Norbert, she said, you don't remember
Which one?
Daddy.
And Marion?
I think it was Marianne, or one of them, or was telling me. I think it was Marianne. She said she remembers when Daddy used to, fall behind, be plowing, and he'd fall down trying to keep up with the mule
I can believe that. Right.
And she said that was really hard to be farming with those mules because, you had the, one row blister going like that. You had to guide it and make it straight and then make rows with it. But you also had a flat breaking plow with the one deal that you plowed up to. You had to first plow up the dirt and then you made your rows and then you...
Right, because it made it easier to get through it, to make the rows. Right, absolutely.
Then you haired them down with the hair.
Right.
And then you first planted them with the cultivator.
So now this one, I don't even know how old we were, but I barely remember some stories about it. I know we were, I'm going to say maybe around 5 or 6, when Grandpa and Grandma's original house had burned down. And I think that was due to an electrical fire. Was that correct?
Yes, that was.
So that original house, was it basically the same layout as the house is now? Was it redesigned when y'all rebuilt it? What happened with that?
No, the one that was burned down was totally different. It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a long house. It wasn't as high. It was a story and a half. About a story and a half. And what Daddy and I think Joe Sudovitz, his cousin, they built the house. And I think Daddy's dad, my grandpa Packard, they all built that house, and so it was a well-built house. And going back to that house, I remember when I was at home that time, and that was Carla that came through. And that house was on blocks, concrete blocks. Mm-hmm. And that Carla was, I think the winds of it at that time were 163 or 167 miles an hour. And I tell you, we were in that house, and that house was shaking like this. The windows were rattling, and the house never did come off the foundation, which was, by the grace of God, that it stayed on the foundation.
Well, for a wooden home, that's phenomenal.
For a wooden home
incredible.
Like that. And it was, because, a lot of homes that time did get damaged.
Yeah,
but
I can imagine.
We were lucky at
something
time.
Else.
But that house was so well built. It was built from old lumber. And that old lumber at that time, it was hard. It wasn't like your lumber today. If you drove a nail in that old lumber, you'd bend a few nails, but not this one here.
Yeah, because today's lumber is a lot more flexible.
Right.
So.
Right.
All right. So, do you remember? Because this is one of those things. I had talked to. I had texted Nathan. I'd also text Pam about some of these things because I was trying to remember. So Grandpa would sit on the front porch and he had his dogs. Now, I could not for the life of me remember what some of those dogs' names were. But Nathan told me one was Snoopy. I think there was Rover, or maybe Pam had said Rover. Oh. I think Grandpa had a bull named Apple. Do you remember any of those kind of names? Any of Grandpa's dogs' names?
Them dogs' names.
You don't remember?
I don't remember a whole lot, but I do know. I remember Grandpa always sitting on that porch waiting for somebody to come up.
And he always had those dogs right next to him.
Yeah, I know it. He could always see us way down the road coming already. And he was happy to, of course, that was when he was already older.
Yes. So I just was wondering about the dogs because for the life of me, I can still picture the dogs. I just could not think of their names. Now, this is towards the very end because we're going to be ending this pretty soon. But tell me some more stories about Grandpa specifically that are cherished memories that you still have of it? So, for instance, we
Oh.
knew how phenomenal his work ethic is. What else do you remember about Grandpa in particular that you'll never forget?
I don't know. I love Grandpa and I love my dad and mom
Right.
very much. They were the best parents out of anybody. And in fact, I talked to a friend of mine, my best friend, and when we got talking about them shirts he said, you know, my mama did the same thing. And I said, what? He said, yeah, my mama made me shirts like that from that Robin Hood flowers. And that was funny. But him and I were best friends. But no, going back to Daddy, it was the way he cared about all his children and Mama too. The way they just looked out for us. They never put themselves first. They always put the children first and put all the kids first. And I think that's what I still miss them today. And
Oh, we all do. Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of those things that you never forget. So those
Right.
memories you have right now, you're never going to forget those.
Right.
And that's important for you to keep talking about those memories
Right.
so that way the rest of us understand it.
Right.
And we all know what kind of a phenomenal worker he was. We all know what kind of an incredible
But
woman
not
Grandma
only
was.
that, they were great human beings.
Absolutely.
On top of just, working, they were outstanding human beings. I mean,
Absolutely they were.
their character was outstanding.
That's why we miss them so much
yes,
today.
exactly.
I mean, what we wouldn't give right now, just think about this. What we would not give right now to have Grandpa sitting right here with us. Can you imagine what that podcast would
Oh
be
my God.
like? Just the thought of it cracks me up.
He could tell me some stories.
Oh, that would be so
That made-
phenomenal.
My little granddaughter always wants me to tell her stories about when I was a little boy. But boy, you talk about stories. My grandpa my
Dad,
dad
right.
could make stories that were out of this world. And
So that's why I would
Yeah.
if there was anybody I would love to have from history, I would love to have Grandpa here to talk to him as
Yeah.
well. That would be phenomenal. But we're coming to the end of the episode, unfortunately. But there's going to be another follow-up episode somewhere later down the
Yeah.
line where we're going to talk about some more questions
there's
about
a
the
lot
farm.
more I need.
Oh, yeah, there absolutely is. I'm just looking forward to hearing a lot more about those other episodes. And we're hoping eventually to be able to get some of Dad's sisters, brother, whoever we could get on here. We're going to try and get some more information from as many people as we possibly can. And Dad's good about keeping in contact with them because some things that they remember, he may not. And it's important just to keep some of the stories going because I love to hear about them. I know the grandkids love to hear about them. And it's a great thing to continue to do these kind of episodes. So, Dad, is there anything else you want to say?
Let me tell you something else.